Have you ever played a successful indie game and thought to yourself, geez, I could probably make something like that? Or maybe you have a better sense of reality, and while you know it'd take an immense amount of work to make something like, say, Pizza Tower, it's still something you want to at least try to do. Maybe you have a deep desire to create or to learn a new skill. Whatever your motivation is, maybe it just feels impossible to actually get out there and make a video game because too much of your time is tied up in, well, your actual full-time job. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's still possible to make video games even if you have a separate full-time job, and even if that job isn't as a programmer, because, well, that's what I'm doing. I started making video games about 5 years ago, and I was already a good 6 years into my career in user experience, so it's not too late to start making video games either. And depending on the scope of your projects and the kinds of games that you want to make, it doesn't even have to be super difficult. Now, it can be, but again, that's up to you and what you're hoping to get out of game development. So in this video, I want to give my own set of advice to anyone aspiring to make video games while also holding on to their full-time job, and I also just want to share what my personal experience has been with game dev. Hopefully what I say can be valuable to you guys as someone who's been doing this for 5 years. So the first critical piece of balancing game dev with a full-time job is being consistent. When I first started learning how to make video games, I promised myself I would dedicate 30 minutes a day to learning the engine I had chosen, which is GameMaker, by the way. I used online tutorials, and every day during lunch, I shut down all other responsibilities in my brain, and I just focused on learning game development. It only took a couple months of working through tutorials before I started feeling like I could make my own ideas come to life. I think part of why that worked for me was because it was a relatively reasonable commitment, just 30 minutes a day. It was pretty sustainable, and from a sort of psychological standpoint, it was easy to get started knowing I was just dedicating 30 minutes to it. Now, I would commonly take time in the evenings too, because I really was pretty excited to learn, but always having a specific time in the day that I looked forward to was a great way to sustainably stay consistent. Even now, 5 years later, I hold myself to a specific number of hours each week to dedicate to game development, with specific windows of time carved out just for working on our game Tethergeist, which, by the way, you should wishlist on Steam if you're into precision platformers. I've got a link below. Anyway, for me personally, I usually spend 20 or more hours a week on this project, usually in the evenings and on weekends. For your projects, that might look very different, depending on how big your game is and how quickly you want to finish it. So that kind of brings me to my next bit of advice. You need to be willing to sacrifice other things in your life if you want to have time to develop games outside of your full-time job. For me, that's been spending less time watching TV and, ironically, less time playing video games. I have kids, so after work and before bed, I focus on family time. I'm really only able to work on game development in the evenings, and that was commonly when I'd turn on my favorite show. Another form of sacrifice is how I use my paid time off. I have a salaried full-time job, so I have a specific number of hours that I'm allowed to take off throughout the year, and then of course there are like specific holidays when the office is closed. I've used plenty of hours of PTO to work on game development, and sometimes it can feel a bit unfair that I'm using what should be break time to continue working. But at the same time, I've chosen to spend my free time that way, working on video games. So sometimes I have to sacrifice TV time, and sometimes I have to sacrifice PTO. But again, the amount of sacrifice is largely up to you. Just be smart about preserving time for all of the other things that fill your bucket. Within that same line of thinking, game development can commonly be one of the things that does fill your bucket. So one of my bits of advice is to learn to love game development. And I don't just mean the inherently fun parts of it, but all of it. Learn to love debugging, learn to love marketing your game, learn to love playtesting it with strangers. Learn to love negative feedback, and then use your learnings from that feedback to refine and improve your game, and learn to love going through that process. The more you can enjoy the experience of making video games, the easier it becomes to dedicate the time that it will require. And my last bit of advice is to be patient on several different levels of granularity. Day to day, it takes a lot of patience to get new features working or to make new artwork. Code frequently feels like it's fighting back, and sometimes I'll spend 2 hours on something that, in my opinion, should have taken just 10 minutes to complete. Bugs come up, maybe the game gameplay doesn't behave right or random other things break. It's just super common for things to take a lot of time. On a more macro scale, you also have to be patient with just how long it takes to make a video game. I think it's a normal human fallacy to underappreciate the amount of effort and time things can take, especially when looking at video games. Many games that look pretty simple on the surface have thousands of hours poured into them with extremely complex systems under the hood. A common adage you'll hear from indie game developers: take whatever time frame you originally thought your game would take to complete and double it. In my experience, it's been more like triple it. And that's okay. Game development just takes time, so naturally patience is super important too. Anyway, those are my 2 cents on how to balance game development with a full-time job. Looking back at honestly my whole life, I've always been a bit of a restless soul. I've always got to have some sort of side project going on, whether that be writing music for my band in college, designing a board game with my brother, or teaching online courses. I've just always had some sort of side hustle going on in my life because I just have this innate strong desire to be doing something or to be creating something. And I realize everyone's different. Some people have way more energy than I do, and they can handle their side projects much more easily than I can. I commonly have to pace myself. Other people work better being able to narrow down their focus to just a couple of things at a time, and they're able to just be really efficient on those few things. Whatever the case is for you, hopefully you at least feel more inspired that if you really want to, you can absolutely balance game development with a separate full-time job. You just need to find a cadence that works for you. Find a way to be consistent, stay motivated, and enjoy the journey. And who knows, maybe after working on game development part-time, you'll eventually be successful enough to turn it into your full-time thing. Whatever the case is, you got this.